Hello, fellow members of the Alliance, and welcome to episode 19 of the Alliance Football Podcast. I'm your host, Rod Villagomez. Find me on Twitter at RJ Villagomez. Find the show on Twitter at Alliance FB Pod. It is our normal weekly breakdown. We have got some great games to break down and maybe a little bit of news to talk about as well. So I know you know what I'm going to talk about later, but we're going to save that for a little later in the episode. We've got great action to break down that actually happened on the field this week, so we're going to get into it right now. It was certainly an exciting week 6 all around the AAF. So much stuff going on, so much happening. But other than the stuff that was going on off the field, there was a lot of great stuff going on the field. And in fact, we were treated to a pretty good game on the opening game of the weekend. It was Memphis and it was Salt Lake. Salt Lake walking away with this one 22-9 over the Memphis Express. And there was a lot of stuff to digest during the course of this game. And the three things that we can take away from this week is that, one, Salt Lake is not dead yet, folks. They have not gone away completely out of the race of the West, and they're sticking around, and they solidified that with the win this week over the Express. Their offense looked very solid against a defense that was coming in one of the top ranked in the league against both the run and the pass, and Josh Woodrum had himself a pretty decent day. He went 24 of 37 for 242 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, and a 2-point conversion. So Woodrum looked a lot like he did to start off the season. You know, that first game of the season, he looked pretty good. The second game, he looked all right, or the second game, he was hurt. But then when he came back, you know, he looked a little bit shaken. Now he looks like the Josh Woodrum that started out the season. And I think if he can continue to play the way he is, or he did this game, I think Salt Lake might actually be in pretty good shape going into the last half of this season, and could possibly walk away with a playoff spot, depending on how things shake out with the other teams, and we've seen some of that stuff play out already this weekend too. So again, Salt Lake still in the mix for this stuff with an offense that's looking okay. With Brandon Oliver off, we knew that the bulk of the carries would go to Joel Buonio, and he did. He got 19 carries in this game for 60 yards. It wasn't a spectacular Joe Buonio day because, again, this Memphis Express rush defense is definitely one of the better ones in the league, and so they had an uphill battle in the rushing game, but you know, they gave Joel Buonio 19 carries. He got 60 yards out of it, so it was a pretty decent rushing day for the Stallions. And you know, the thing of it is that we knew that Buonio was not necessarily an every down back. He definitely is one that is a lot more powerful than most, but you know, when you give him enough carries, he can do stuff with them. Taron Ward actually came into this game. He got 3 carries for 24 yards. And then, of course, Terrell Newby, who we've all learned as a result of the fantasy segment, came in and rushed 3 times for 14 yards. So not a bad day altogether for the Salt Lake rushing attack. But really the surprise of this game was the tight end play. Holy cow. We talked a little bit with our friend, Mr. Ferguson, about tight ends kind of stealing the show, and he was kind of using it as fantasy purposes. But for this offense purposes, the tight ends were definitely stealing the show. For Salt Lake, it was Nick Truesdale, who is yet to drop a pass, actually, or even miss a pass in his AAF career. He caught all 5 of his targets for 67 yards and a touchdown. He had a long of 39, which is a beautiful pass. And then, you know, he had 51 yards after the catch. So that proves to me that not only was he able to catch what was given to him in the actual pass itself, but he was able to break it loose. And for a tight end, when you've got that kind of escapability, that goes a long way in setting up the rest of your passing attack, and it did, because Adonis Jennings almost out of nowhere caught 4 of his 8 targets for 51 yards, and then the other tight end, Anthony Denham, 4 receptions on 5 targets for 42 yards, and he had a touchdown as well. So the 2 touchdown passes that Woodrum threw to last night this weekend were both to tight ends, and so that goes a long way in making you a comfortable quarterback when you know your tight ends can make plays for you in the passing game and not just blocking for you or blocking for the running game. So the offense, again, for Salt Lake, put up 22 points. I mean, obviously not a monster point total, but still an impressive outing nonetheless, when they had just relied on a lot of targets and a lot of weapons that weren't necessarily there for them all season long. And if Woodrum can continue on this pace, and if he can continue to find the receivers that he does, and his tight ends continue to work for him, I think the rest of the West is in trouble if they want to keep Salt Lake out of the playoffs. And that also because of their defense. And I mean, Carter Schultz is getting all of the press right now, and I'd be willing to place a pretty sizable wager that he'll get another look up in the NFL in the offseason. If nothing else, they'll bring him in to work him out and put him on some practice rosters to start with, and maybe give him some training camp looks. But I think Carter Schultz is destined to go back into the NFL. So enjoy him while you have him, Salt Lake. Enjoy him while we have him, AAF fans, because Carter Schultz is not going to stick around very much longer in the AAF, in my opinion. And he got himself another couple of sacks. He's still the league leader in sacks. He had 4 solo tackles, 2 of them for a loss, and he hit the quarterback 4 times, right? And none is more notable than what we'll talk about next. But, he got to the quarterback 4 times, and that definitely goes a long way to making your quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket and not able to make the plays that he would normally make if he had a clean pocket. So, kudos for the defense, who had 2 fumble recoveries on top of their turnovers as a defense, and they really combined. They combined for 12 hits on the quarterback, and that's insane. I mean, 11 on Silvers, 1 on Mettenberger. It was just it's when you get that much pressure on a quarterback, you're not. I mean, they gave up 9 points, and that goes a long way in solidifying the fact that your defense was just on them all day long and did not give them an opportunity to score any points, hardly whatsoever. And then that leads into the second thing that we're going to talk about, and that Memphis is just cursed right now at the QB position. You start with Hackenberg. Hackenberg's ineffective. You go to Mettenberger. He looks good. He gets hurt on the first play of the first drive of this game. And then in comes Brandon Silvers, who looked pretty good, but again, and I know, listen, I'm not going to gloss over the fact that now there might be a proverbial light at the end of this tunnel for Memphis, but we'll talk about that in a completely separate situation. We're talking about the game here, and that's how it's going to stay. But for Memphis, again, at the QB position, Mettenberger going down on that Carter Schultz sack on the first play of the drive for the Express, and that signaled pretty much the result of the game. I mean, when Mettenberger went down, you looked like a little twisted ankle, and then it turned out to be a lot worse than that. So now he's going on the IR as a result of that play. But then Brandon Silvers comes in relief. He doesn't do all that bad. I mean, he goes 23 of 37 for 242 yards and a touchdown. It wasn't like he was a horrendous failure. But, with Mettenberger going down, the offense could not get anything going. That Salt Lake defense just buzzing all over the ball carrier, just was unable to get much going past the play of number 3, who we're going to take away from. That's Reese Horn. That guy can play. He was definitely Brandon Silver's main target and had 129 of those 242 yards that Silvers threw for on 8 receptions and 10 targets. So he had some great plays. And I think for Reese Horn, he's definitely one of those receivers that you need to keep your eye on for the rest of the season. And now, things being as they are, and people coming in to the team, if Reese Horn can continue to play well for his new quarterback, I think that we might be in for some good times ahead for Reese Horn, and he could very well get another couple of looks up at the NFL level. But Reese Horn has been one of those receivers that's been kind of flying under the radar because he's been on this Express team and this Express offense that hasn't necessarily been the greatest in the world. And so for him, I don't think the publicity is there. I don't think the media is there for him as much as it is for everybody else. But if you quietly look back at Reese Horn and the season that he's put together, you actually find that it's not quite as bad as you would think for being on a team like the Express, who is definitely struggling right now. But I think, again, for Reese Horn, better days could possibly be ahead. I mean, he's got 316 yards. He doesn't have a TD catch yet, but he's been targeted 33 times, and he's caught 21 of those. He's had up and down weeks. He had a poor showing in week 1 with only 28 yards. He came back and followed it up with 56-yarder against Arizona. Had one catch for 11 yards in that Orlando game. 4 for 63 in San Diego, another down day, 1 for 29 against Atlanta, and then he blows up for this 129-yard game against the Salt Lake Stallions. So, again, for Reese Horn, he's just got to show a little more consistency, and I think this game might have been his breakout game, and we might see going forward a Reese Horn that is capable of big plays just like this, to keep up with the Charles Johnsons of the world, to keep up with the Pearsonells and those guys putting up big numbers all over the league. So really the biggest takeaway from this game is that, look, Salt Lake's defense is just ridiculous, man. These guys, they are one of the classes of the league, and I think they're just getting stronger, and they're just finding their stride. So I would be careful if I were any other team right now playing Salt Lake. I think they're on a great upswing, and I think that they're going to put together a great run here to close out the season. So woe be it to those folks that are about to play the Salt Lake Stallions, because they are fired up, and now with their offense matching their defense, this is definitely going to be a close finish in the West for everybody involved. So, all right, final score again, it was Salt Lake Stallions 22, the Memphis Express 9. We will see what happens in the coming weeks with Memphis, as they've got a lot of changes coming and a lot of public eyes on them. So, if anybody can handle the publicity, I think it's Mike Singletary, and hopefully he has his guys focused and ready for the next game and not too far ahead. So, all right, well, that is it for that game. Again, not a whole lot to take away other than the fact that Salt Lake is still good and Memphis still has questions. So let's move on to another exciting game. Let's face it, we've had a ton of close finishes in this league, right? And exciting games and close games. But this one could very well be probably the game of the year. And maybe not just for the fact that there was so much action on the field, with just the fact that it was the first real huge upset of the season, and a game that was exciting all the way down till the end, and maybe even more exciting at the end than it was throughout the rest of it. And I, of course, am talking about the Orlando Apollos hosting the Arizona Hotshots, and the Hotshots coming away with the road win. Not only was that important to get away with a road win, but to knock Orlando off of the ranks of the undefeated. And that is exactly where we'll start. Our first takeaway is that one, the Apollos are human. They can be beaten. And in this game, it wasn't as if this Orlando team looked off, really. They still played a game that you would expect them to play. Garrett Gilbert turning in a 23 of 48, 268-yard performance with 2 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, his first one. So that was definitely a big signpost for the rest of this game. But, you had Jalen Marshall pitching in with almost 100 yards of receiving and a touchdown. Sean Price actually had a good game. He caught 2 of 3 for 59 yards. Charles Johnson, not very many yards. He had 4 catches for 28 yards. He was targeted 11 times, which is the most on the team, along with Jalen Marshall. And then, of course, Charles had his touchdown. But it was very quiet for Charles Johnson on the night, much to the chagrin of his fantasy owners. But, and then, of course, their rushing game with Ernest Johnson getting 43 yards on 9 carries. Davion Smith also getting 9 carries on 39 yards with those. Akeem Hunt, 2 for 12. So, again, these aren't un-Apollo-like numbers. It wasn't like they fell off the face of the earth. And in fact, the Apollos defense still getting work and numbers from their normal folks. Reggie Northrup, 10 tackles, 1 for a loss, and he got to the quarterback once to hit him. no sacks. Jarrell Worthy had 6 solo tackles, and it wasn't like this Orlando team was completely off. It just was the fact that this Arizona team was hungry and stayed hungry throughout the entire game, and a lot of that had to do with the play of the quarterback, who didn't put up huge numbers and didn't have to. And that's the second point, is that Arizona made a lot with a little. They ended up winning the game, but didn't have to have a whole lot of production out of their major folks. John Wolford, 16 of 27, 162 yards and a touchdown. Not a glaringly awesome day for Wolford, but he was efficient, and he actually just made plays when they needed to be made. Tim Cook pitching in as also rushing. He actually had more rushing yards than Jarrell Presley. On less carries. Tim Cook had 11 carries for 71 yards. Jarrell Presley, 13 of 57, but Presley found the end zone twice in this game, once on the ground. Justin Stockton actually had 12 carries, so there was a lot of carries for the running backs in this game. Stockton turned his carries into 37 yards. So again, the three-headed monster of Cook, Presley, and Stockton had over 130, 140 yards total. So, it was a good rushing day for all the running backs together. And then for the hot shots receiving, the good story out of this was that Richard Mullaney came back and immediately paid dividends. And if you listen to our show on Fridays with our friend John Ferguson, he told you about Mullaney coming out and that they would probably have to press him into action almost immediately. And that's exactly what played out here. He had 6 receptions on 7 targets for 73 yards. So, definitely a huge contributor in the passing game, where on a night where Rashard Ross did not do Rashard Ross things. He had 5 catches on 10 targets for 51 yards. And really, as we talked about in the last segment with yards after catch for these tight ends in Salt Lake, in this instance, the hot shots, Mullaney only had 7 yards after the catch. Rashard Ross, 2 yards after the catch, which you definitely don't see out of those two very often. They're definitely yak kind of guys. But that just shows that Orlando's defense was still on top of them as soon as they caught the ball, and they didn't get a lot of breakaway. So, again, it wasn't a spectacularly stellar night for either side of the ball in Arizona, but they just hung around. And then Jarrell Presley getting that touchdown through the air, again, this was a game that started out relatively slow. I mean, in the first quarter, it was a 6-3 ball game. Charles Johnson got a touchdown, and you thought, okay, well, now we're off to another Orlando start. And then, Nick Folk hit a field goal. And then, you think to yourself, well, now we're starting out the way that every Orlando game starts out, right? Is that the Orlando Apollos get a touchdown, and then everybody else is just chasing them after that. But then, a couple of drives stall, and then, they get a field goal, Orlando does. And then all of a sudden, here comes Wolford and company with that Jarrell Presley touchdown, that he caught, that one. And then they get the 2-point. And then now they're up 14-9 going into the half. So a situation that Orlando doesn't find themselves in very often, that's going down in the half. And then, of course, the third quarter goes by with nothing huge. And then this is where point 3 comes up and what we learned. We learned that fourth quarters in this league are absolutely golden. There is so much good stuff that, I know that the first 3 quarters are still good, but fourth quarters in this league, man, if you stick around for nothing else, don't ever turn a game off in the AAF, because you just never know what it's going to come down to. And this fourth quarter was exactly that, because, Orlando comes roaring down on their second drive in the fourth quarter to score a touchdown. Jalen Marshall getting into the end zone, and then the 2-point conversion by Akeem Hunt is good. So now all of a sudden they're up 17-14, and it's up to Arizona to answer back, and they do, right? That very next drive, Jarrell Presley finishes it off with a 1-yard touchdown, and then they get the 2-point conversion, and now they're up. So, again, this is one of those things where it's last quarter excitement. Orlando gets the ball back, and it looks like they're going to do some things with it, right? And then all of a sudden, Garrett Gilbert gives it up. on a fumble, and it's, a strip sack fumble, and Arizona gets the ball back, and you're thinking, okay, well, now they just got to kill the clock out. Well, they don't. They actually go 3 and out because they can't get a first down, and they barely run the ball, or they run the clock down to about 1:02, which is a whole lot of time for Garrett Gilbert and the Orlando Apollos, right? And in fact, it was almost too much time as they managed to work all the way down the field to the 8-yard line. I mean, this is, again, the Arizona 8-yard line. They started out on their own 18-yard line. And then they ended up working the ball all the way down, especially on the heels of a Garrett Gilbert pass to Price for 48 yards. That was a ridiculous throw. And then, of course, he stops the clock. And then he throws an incomplete pass to Thompson. And then he throws another pass down the field to get them to the 8 yards to Jalen Marshall for 26 yards. So 2 big throws by Garrett Gilbert gets them down inside the 8-yard line. And then this is the thing that killed him, right? So they get down to the very end, and they're gonna clock the ball with just a few seconds left on the clock, with 4 seconds left on the clock. Everybody gets up on the ball and nobody's set, but Garrett Gilbert has the ball snapped anyways, downs it, false start, run off. Orlando is no longer undefeated. So there was tension all the way up into the last 4 seconds of this game. And it was a treat. It was a treat to watch this sort of drama unfold in front of you. I mean, it was definitely, especially when Arizona left a minute on the clock for Garrett Gilbert. I said it too. I said, that's too much time for Garrett Gilbert. You just left him time to win this ball game. And who knows? Who knows what would have happened had everybody been set and that ball had been clocked the way it was supposed to be. It certainly would have made things a heck of a lot more interesting. Because at 17-22, they would have had to get a touchdown to win the ball game. A field goal definitely wouldn't have done them any good. But with the way Garrett Gilbert was throwing the ball there at the end of the game, it could have happened. I mean, there was a couple of times where, and especially that Charles Johnson touchdown, the route that Charles ran, Jalen Marshall, same thing. They can both run good routes in the end zone in order to score a point. So, it's one of those games where you're happy enough that you watched it because it's a good classic example of why the AAF is such a great product, and how it doesn't matter what your record is. Everybody's fighting for the opportunity to be noticed, and teams are going to play, and teams are going to try to show up, even if you're 5-0 going into it. So now Orlando is 5-1. And then Arizona moves up to 3-3 on the year to even their record at 500. So again, this is going to be a wild ride in the West. I mean, Arizona just making a case now to stay up there with the Fleets of the world for second place. And then we'll talk about their game and San Antonio's game in a second. But again, it's still a close run. San Diego 3-3, Arizona 3-3, Salt Lake 2-4, and still not completely out of the mix yet. But for the Orlando Apollos, that drops them obviously to, like I said, to 5-1. And right now Birmingham at 4-2, right? I mean, this is a race for first place now that Birmingham and Orlando are having. And it doesn't affect, I guess, the standings either way, because they'd play each other anyways. Whoever was first, whoever was second, it just means home field advantage. But then the Atlanta Legends are still kind of on the outside looking in at Birmingham. And, that's a opportunity that they're trying at 2-4 to not waste any more games going forward. So again, a big upset and just an amazing game. And look, if you did not get a chance to watch any of these games, on the AAF website, you can click on the game summary and you can watch the replay. I would highly encourage you, if you're not somebody that watches every game, to go back and spend some time to at least watch this game and any other ones that you might have missed that you thought were good. I know that my brother, he can't watch games after they've already happened. He's got this thing against watching replayed games, but this is an entertaining game, and I think you do yourself a disservice if you were a fan and you haven't watched this game yet. So go to the AAF website right now, watch the replay, and check it out because, again, this was one that I don't think you want to miss. It was an exciting game all the way down to the last. And if you just want to watch the fourth quarter, watch the fourth quarter because that's where a lot of the real fun action is. But, again, I would suggest watching these games because they're a lot of fun. So Orlando is human. And now they fall to 5-1, and the Arizona Hotshots have something to look forward to now in a race in the West. So, all right, let's continue on. Sunday treated us to a beautiful opening game in Atlanta. It was between the Atlanta Legends and the San Antonio Commanders, and this was a game where, wow, it was just. I got to tell you, the three things that you're going to take away from this. The first one is that San Antonio is just scary good when they are right. This looked like one of the probably most complete team efforts in the league this season, and obviously it showed in the final score as San Antonio just completely ran away with this one, 37-6 over the Atlanta Legends. And this game, I don't know, it wasn't even close, to be honest with you. It was from the start just all San Antonio, and in fact they did a lot of what they did the week before when they jumped out to that huge lead over the Hotshots, and then of course the Hotshots came storming back, but this time Atlanta did not. It was 20-6 at the half for San Antonio, and they just poured it on. It started with a touchdown by Kenneth Farrow, then Logan Woodside to big play McKay, and it just, again, it kept going. Woodside to Rodriguez for another touchdown in the second quarter. So San Antonio just really looks amazing when it's all going right for them. Logan Woodside, not a lot like the effort of Wolford, John Wolford, had to run through him like Woodside. No, Wolford. No, yes, Wolford. In that, Woodside was 17 of 23, 164 yards, 2 touchdowns. So it wasn't, again, he didn't even break 200 yards, but he still managed to put together a complete game effort because he had a defense that just would not quit. I mean, these guys were all over the place. They intercepted Aaron Murray 3 times, and they got 4 fumble recoveries. It was just a game where nobody quit. It didn't matter what the score was. Nobody on either side of the ball was quitting for San Antonio, and they looked good all the way through the game. Speaking of looking good all the way through, Kenneth Farrow had a huge monster game a couple weeks ago, kind of disappeared in the background. He only had 35 yards rushing. He had 9 carries for 35 yards. Trey Williams, 6 carries for 32 yards. So not a huge rushing game for the Commanders. And again, because with Woodside not throwing very many yards, the leading receiver on their team was Cam Clear, the tight end. 5 catches for 45 yards on 5 targets. So this was totally the week of the tight end for everybody, as again, Cam Clear was the leading receiver for the Commanders. And then big play Mikal McKay, 3 catches for 37 yards in that touchdown. And then Evan Rodriguez only had 1 catch for 33 yards and a touchdown. And guess what position he is? A tight end. I'm telling you, if you're a fantasy player, you were pulling your hair out because that kind of stuff was going on all night long. But again, for the Commanders, nobody had glaring offensive numbers, but they just jumped on every opportunity, and they didn't, they had short fields with all of the turnovers, and it was just insane to watch it all go down. It was definitely highlighted by that pick 6 by Deron Smith. Wow. What a play. Aaron Murray just could not find any sort of purchase the entire game, and it was evident that he was uncomfortable. And he put the ball up in the air 41 times. He was 30 of 41, 215 yards, 1 touchdown, but 3 interceptions. And there was a lot of question on how or why he was really still in that game after the first couple of interceptions. And then, the pick 6, that definitely did it for him. But again, he just wasn't comfortable as he was the last few games, and it showed. So, Deron Smith really just pouring it on with that interception, that pick six, and it was a beautiful play. I had a fun time watching it. And then, special teams also pitched in as well, as there was a bunch of great kick returns, including that 79-yarder by Greg Ward Jr. What a great return that was. So again, a lot of exciting things happening on the field, and 2 special teams and defensive touchdowns that meant that Woodside didn't have to work quite as hard as he would have had to had they not happened. So, again, San Antonio is making a case for being the better team in the West right now, as everybody else has been up and down. But San Antonio's resurgence, as it were, is coming on at just the right time, and now they are first place in the West at 4-2, and so that is, again, good momentum for them going into the last part of the season here. So for San Antonio, they're just, again, scary good. Number 2 is that, look, despite Atlanta losing, Keith Tobridge is a thing, folks. And for what it's worth, I actually am a low-key fan of Keith Tobridge. So to see him come out and do well, what position does he play? Kids, everybody? Yes, that's right. He's a tight end. 5 receptions on 5 targets for 42 yards. Again, not a completely stellar off the page kind of a game, but he did lead the team in receiving yards. So, for Aaron Murray, he was able to find his tight end, and his tight end caught all 5 of the passes that he had. So, again, it's just a matter of Aaron Murray needing to be able to be more consistent. It wasn't as if he didn't have a completely, you take out the 3 interceptions, he had a better day passing than did Logan Woodside, albeit 1 touchdown short, but still it was a pretty decent day for him. And then, what's sad is that, and this is our third point for this game, is that Atlanta really does need to find an identity, and it really, it's more than just Aaron Murray. It's the fact that the rushing attack didn't really get off the ground this game. Brandon Radcliffe, 6 carries, 24 yards. Denard Robinson, 3 carries for 14 yards. Terrion Folston, who everybody was on and high on, he had only 4 carries for 13 yards. So, and even with the catches for Folston, like Folston had 5 catches on 5 targets, sure, and a touchdown, but he only had 8 yards receiving the entire game. So, it wasn't as if he was a threat in the passing game. Shantavius Jones, 6 catches, 9 yards, 6 receptions, 9 targets, 38 yards. Malachi Jones, 3 of 4 for 35. James Quick caught 2 of his targets for 31. Radcliffe, again, you look at the running backs, Radcliffe and Folston. Radcliffe had 5 catches for 27 yards. It's just a matter of they need to find a way to have some sort of offensive identity, and then their defense as well, because their defense was getting roughed up too by San Antonio, and maybe it was just because they were on the field a lot more, or maybe it was because momentum had swung San Antonio's way, but it just felt like whatever San Antonio wanted to do, they were doing it, and they were doing it well. So for Atlanta, it's just a matter of they need to figure out what they're going to be, because they're not completely out of this yet. I mean, I know the Iron won, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but it's still not completely out of the realm of possibility that if Birmingham drops the next couple and Atlanta wins the next couple, we could be looking at a pretty tight race for second place in the East. Again, it's only a couple of games difference right now, and there's 4 to go. So we're looking at an opportunity for Atlanta, if they can find themselves an identity, to get there and to really make a run out of it for the East. Again, not a lot of takeaways from this game, because again, it's just a simple fact of San Antonio is coming on a really hot streak, and they are hitting on all cylinders at the right time right now. And they ran into a team that was coming in feeling good, but unfortunately just could not get it done. So for Atlanta, they got some questions again to answer, and then for San Antonio, I think they will take this game and first place in the West and run with it and get ready for next week. And again, for the rest of the Commanders, they've got to be feeling good with the complete team effort. You get a special teams touchdown, you got a defensive touchdown, you get a couple of offensive touchdowns, and every part of the game is contributing at the right time. And as you go into the last back half of the season, that's kind of how you want it. That's exactly the position you want to be in, is a team that's riding high with everybody pitching in and making plays on the ball. So, all right, let's get to the last game of the weekend, which was a good one, and we'll talk about that coming up. If I were writing a screenplay about football, I would probably write the exact script of what we saw play out in the last game of the week. It was the Birmingham Iron. It was the San Diego Fleet, and the Iron come through to beat the Fleet 32-29. Now the Iron were riding a 2-game losing streak, and they looked like they were losing their way, and their foundation and everything was falling apart for the Iron. And so they had to switch quarterbacks and all this other stuff. And then the Fleet, the Fleet were coming in, and they were a team that were looking good and then weren't looking good, and now they're looking good again. But all of a sudden, this was a game that came down to the final kick, another walk-off in the AAF, another walk-off kick. But the three things to take away from this game is that, one, Luis Perez is back. I say as a question mark. This is weird, right? You go into the game. Obviously, last week Luis Perez gets pulled after a pick six. In comes Keith Price. He does Keith Price things, and you're happy. Even though Birmingham loses the game, you still think, well, maybe Keith Price will give us a good shot to win. And then when the game starts, Keith Price comes in, and then all of a sudden, one helmet loss later, and Keith Price is out of the game. Obviously, Keith Price leaves this game after getting hit, and what's weird is that it didn't even look like that vicious of a hit. We've seen vicious hits before. That looked like an inopportune hit. The helmet did come off, yes, but it wasn't as if it looked like a hit where you thought to yourself, man, that he's not coming back from that. In fact, a couple plays later, he's standing on the sideline, and even when he walked off, he was like, "I'm good. What happened? Why are you pulling me from the game? What's going on?" Obviously, the players and coaches and the leagues are all taking a serious approach to CTE, and trying to protect quarterbacks from getting hurt and players from getting hurt. So they probably wanted to monitor him for a little while. And obviously in the NFL, there's concussion protocol. So you definitely, regardless of whether or not you get hurt visibly, anybody can say you need to get checked out for concussion. So I'm sure that was probably what was going on initially, but boy, poor Keith Price. Way to get Wally pipped, and after he Wally pipped Luis Perez, it just matter of it was weird. It was a weird sequence because Luis Perez comes in, right, and he does okay, and he doesn't look all that bad, but he throws a couple of bad interceptions, and so you think, well, I guess Luis Perez is going to come out, but he doesn't. And he stays in, and it's weird. I mean, he threw his first touchdown pass, which was great. He finally threw a touchdown pass in the league on his first drive back, and to none other than Trent Richardson, who actually did more than a 4 or 5 yard play. He caught the ball 13 yards. It was a good looking play. Trent Richardson is good for some good-looking plays every once in a while. Can he be the greatest player ever again? I don't think so. But anyways, he's good for some good plays, and he actually gave Luis Perez his first touchdown pass, which was a good way to stay in. But, after that, it was just a matter of you really just kind of scratched your head and wondered, was Price going to come back in? It was a drive in the second quarter that Perez stalled out on and didn't look all that great on. And then you thought, well, okay, now Price will probably come back in. And he didn't. But then all of a sudden on the second drive of the second quarter, Perez comes in, just throws a strike to LaDainian Washington for 83 yards and his second touchdown of the season. So now all of a sudden Luis Perez is looking good. And you're thinking, wow, where was this Luis Perez the entire beginning part of the season? And so, again, now you're starting to think, okay, well, maybe Perez can put it together. And then right after that, the next drive after a 3-and-out by San Diego, Perez throws an interception. So as much as he was good there, he throws an interception. And then you think, well, maybe Price will come back in, and he doesn't. So anyways, this goes on and on and on and on through the whole game. But Luis Perez actually ended up with a hell of a game for Luis Perez standards because, again, up until then, he hadn't thrown a touchdown pass. He wasn't really all that great. But he comes in relief, throws for 359 yards on 27 completions for 3 touchdowns. Now, he did have those 2 interceptions, but this was a Luis Perez season, all encapsulated in one game. So, again, this is, I know what the narrative was, right? Local boy comes home and does well in front of his family and his friends. And I mean, that's a feel good story and everything, but, this wouldn't have happened had Keith Price, not gone down. So my question, and obviously this kind of ties into this first takeaway, is that what did keep Luis Perez in the game? Was it that first touchdown pass, or was it just that they knew Keith Price wasn't really going to work out anyways, and then this injury was kind of an opportunity for them to put Perez back in the game, because Perez looked like he wanted to stay in. Obviously, he was the starter up until that point, but I don't know. Where are we going to see next week? Are we going to see Price or are we going to see Perez? My money's probably on Perez. That's going to happen. So, the second takeaway, and look, I know that, I ride this guy quite a bit, but if we're going to sit here and say that, somebody deserves a second look, the eye test is one thing with Trent Richardson, but when you look at the numbers, you just can't. How is a guy that averages 2.9 yards a carry or in this game, 2.9 yards a carry, somebody you want to take a look at? Sure, he got the touchdown, but he only rushed for 46 yards on 16 carries. There's nothing explosive about him anymore, other than that one catch that he had. He did have 7 catches for 44 yards, so I'll give him that. On 12 targets, the guy was targeted 12 times. Quentin Patton, 15 times. LaDainian Washington, 10 times. Trent Richardson, 12 times. For 44 yards, and it was, I don't know, it's crazy. That guy, he's an enigma, and I'll never be able to completely 100% wrap my brain around Trent Richardson, because he's somebody that makes me scratch my head every time I look at his stats, and then I look at the hype, and then I look at him. So I don't know. Trent Richardson, does he get another shot? I don't think so. I think he's used up all of his shots. I think now if he wants to make himself a nice career playing in the AAF, I think that's what he should do, because I don't think he's going to stick. And even if he does get up to the NFL again, he might be a backup, but there's a lot of great backups in the NFL right now, and I just don't know that he warrants taking up a roster spot from somebody who's not quite as old, I guess, as Trent. But anyway, all right. And then the number 3 thing to take away from this game is that San Diego is still a good team. They just fell on a little bit of hard times, and kind of came short in times where they shouldn't have come short, to be honest with you. Berkovici didn't have himself a bad game, and I know what my folks, my friends, my buddies at the shipyard, they'll definitely pick apart Mike Berkovici in this their next podcast. But me being the coffee mug is half full type of a guy, I'm going to say that, a 311 yard day on 17 completions, 3 touchdowns. Yes, he had those 2 interceptions, and they were bad interceptions. But, again, this is a Birmingham defense that has done bad things against people. So to be able to even put up 29 points against this Birmingham defense, they've got to feel semi-good about the way they played, going into this. So, again, Burko with 3 touchdowns. The running game, still haven't seen what we saw before. I mean, teams have figured out the combination of Watson and Gardner, and even with Sankey coming in, he only rushed the ball twice for 12 yards, and so it wasn't necessarily a great day for anybody on the ground. Watson, 8 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown. Gardner, 8 carries, 19 yards. Still have not seen anything explosive out of Gardner in a couple of weeks. And it's sad. He had a 13-yard long run, but his average was 2.4, a very Trent Richardson-esque like performance. But one of the bright spots on this whole San Diego performance was Dontez Ford. 3 catches, 182 yards. It was a monster day for Ford. And, again, he had himself such an amazing day that, I love breakout games for folks. I really do. It's a matter of watching, young men have these days, and Ford had that 72-yarder along the sidelines, just a beautiful catch. Again, for Dontez Ford, if you weren't watching the games closely, you probably wouldn't really know his name. Unless you were somebody who followed the fleet. But he's definitely a guy that it could really do well in the better next part of the season if Bercovici and him can find some purchase. He's got 435 yards on 15 catches, right? So this was by far his best game. And in the last 3 weeks, really, he's kind of come on. In week 4 against Memphis, he was 3 receptions, 71 yards. You'll notice a pattern here. Week 5 in Salt Lake, he had 3 catches for 94 yards. And then in this week, he had 3 catches for 182 yards. So you notice that on 3 catches, he's continuing to improve his total yardage. And so again, going forward, I think there's a lot of good things to look forward to out of Dontez Ford, because again, Nelson Spruce was not all that effective this week. He had 3 catches, 23 yards, and Gavin Escobar, 1 catch for 22 yards. Not a whole lot of stuff going on past Dontez Ford. So if a couple of other receivers can step up to help out Bercovici, I think the West could be again some place that they can the fleet can do some damage. Now, this game was another game that was interesting all the way down to the end. And, with 4.5 minutes left and an opportunity to drive down and kick a winning field goal, the Birmingham Iron offense did exactly that. Owasu scores a touchdown in the final 4.5 minutes for the Fleet, giving the Fleet the lead. And it was a back and forth game up until then, right? Going into the half, it was 15-9, Birmingham on top, and then San Diego comes back and scores 14 points in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden Birmingham comes back to score 11, or actually make that 8 in the fourth quarter up until the last few minutes of the game, in which again San Diego, and this is point 3, which was point 3 in another one, is that these games are amazing at the end, right? San Diego, the back and forth of it all. Birmingham getting the ball with 4:32, and all they've got to do is just drive down close enough to get a field goal to win the game, and they take it all the way down. It starts off with a pass to Quentin Patton, right, for 10 yards. That was a really huge play from the 25. It got them a first down to the 35. And then, another completion for Perez. And this is a drive where Perez looks sharp. He completed the pass to Koprich, right, out of the backfield for 7 yards. And then Richardson gets him a first down. And then Perez uses his feet for 4 yards. He uses his feet again for 12 yards, right? And then he completes a pass to Palmer for 8 yards. Sends Trent Richardson up the middle again for nothing. And then, again, Trent Richardson one more time as they get close enough into the San Diego side of the field, right? They're at the 31. And then Richardson again runs it for a couple of yards to get a first down, which was an important first down because it was 31 seconds left and they needed to at least get another first down to where they could call a timeout in the last few seconds, which, Lewis did. Called the timeout with 3 seconds left. And then Nick Novak, who used to kick in San Diego for years, sinks one in San Diego again, but sinks the fleet in the process. So that was the exciting finish for that game, and the last game of the week. And Birmingham walks away 32-29 with the win. That game was tied going down into it. So even if Novak would have missed, then we would have been looking at the first overtime in the Alliance, but we did not get that. In fact, we got another walk-off win. So, man, I got to tell you, it's so much fun to watch these games. It's amazing to see the finishes week after week, because it seems like they're getting closer and closer and closer. And there's so many close games. I know we get a blowout here and there, but we've been treated to some excellent football over the course of the first 6 weeks, and I just don't see that slowing up at all as these teams start finding their own and start really getting close in competitiveness, and as teams find their identities. So, but again, not all is lost for this Fleet team, right? They're 3-3 right now. They're sitting in second place in the West, and it's just a matter of where we're going from here, right? They're tied with Arizona at 3-3. But for Birmingham, that gave them a little bit of a lift, as now they are only a game back of the Orlando Apollos, and that's a game they needed to win because Orlando lost. And so to gain ground on that powerful Orlando team, they had to win, and they did. And they came down on the leg of Nick Novak and walked away with the win. So, again, just a great week of football. I'm so excited that we got to watch it. And again, that's another game that if you didn't get a chance to watch, go to AAF.com right now and watch that game, because you will not regret it. Even if you know the ending, it's still fun to watch it get there. In my opinion, I don't know. Maybe I'm silly, but all right. Let's. I'm going to do some overtime. There's a couple of things I want to get to, and we're going to do a quick overtime segment, and we'll go from there. So for overtime, we are going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to answer an Ask Alliance FB pod question on Twitter, and then we're going to talk about the elephant in the room that wears number 2. So, but first, let me answer this Ask Alliance FB pod question. It's from David Comer, Fox2 _. Yeah. David Comer _Fox2 on Twitter. David Comer asks me, he says, does every team have a road jersey, or what is the policy? He feels like not all do, but he saw a couple of alternate jerseys and he's wondering. Well, David, I'll tell you what, not every team has an alternate jersey yet. I know that they're not calling them road or home jerseys. In fact, they're just alternate jerseys, because obviously you saw the Fleet wearing white at home, which doesn't normally happen. It's reserved for the darker colors. But I think what it all boiled down to was the fact that, Birmingham has all black, and that's their only jersey. And so for all black and navy gray, or gray, navy gray, or gray wouldn't have looked good together. I think it would have been very confusing. So I think they would have had to have had the alternate jersey. And then you see Orlando, of course, having the alternate jersey. And Memphis does have an alternate jersey as well, too. I don't know that they've worn it yet, but I know they have an alternate. So there's, I'm assuming that there's probably going to be more coming. I think that we'll start to see maybe like an NHL type of a rollout where there's a home, away, and then an alternate jersey. So we may see maybe more playing with the jersey types and the actual uniforms that they come out in from week to week. So I don't think it'll be drastic. I don't think there'll be super crazy uniform changes, but I do think that we're going to see a few more alternates roll out over the next few weeks, and maybe next season they'll be designated home and away jerseys, and then you can maybe roll out an alternate third if you want. But yeah, I mean, you're right. You're not crazy. It's a matter of they sort of are piecing this out piecemeal, right? Just however they want to get it done, and basically just sort of going with their gut on when they should roll out their alternate jerseys, or maybe they just aren't all done yet and they decided that they wanted to roll them out as they were finishing them. So I haven't really gotten any huge guidance on what it is, but I just know that you're not crazy, and that there's been a bunch of uniform switching going on over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So thank you, David, for the question. We'll look forward to seeing some more of those alternate jerseys as they roll out. Now, okay, I'm going to hit this with a disclaimer, okay? If you want a full take on my thoughts on Johnny Maziel, when the new episode of the Alliance Allies comes out, right? The AAF Allies podcast, when that comes out, I want you to listen to that, because that's basically, I'm going to go way more in depth in that interview than I am now, because I really just don't want to spend a whole lot more time on this guy, because I feel like we haven't seen him at all. So there's no need to cover him in depth, but I will give you my opinion, which I will totally stand behind, and I don't care who tries to convince me otherwise, except for Byrne. Man, she did such a great job of kind of giving me a softer, gentler side. But I'm gonna give you the hard truth right now, okay? Listen, I am telling you, as somebody who lived through this hype last season, if you are a Johnny Maziel fan, temper your expectations. And if you're a Johnny Maziel fan, you should know this already, because you went through it last year in the CFL. You saw him go to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. You saw him wash out of the Hamilton Tiger Cats and go to the Montreal Alouettes and wash out there as well. You got your hopes up that you could see Johnny football, right? And you didn't really see Johnny football. You saw Johnny Maziel. And you can make all the excuses in the world for him. You can say, well, he was learning a new type of football. He didn't get the waggle. He didn't get the 3 downs. But listen, if he's as talented and the second coming of football Christ as you think he is, that should have been something that he would have been able to start picking up on by his 4th or 5th game, right? It would have been something that he could have put together, because he's so gifted football wise that he could have picked up on the system, right? But he didn't. And he gave up on it. I don't care what you say. He walked away from that league. He had the opportunity to walk away from that league, and he did. To take a gigantic pay cut to play in the AAF because he feels like it's going to give him a better shot at the NFL. It will not, unless he changes his complete and total attitude. This will be the exact same thing as the NFL, as the Spring League, as the CFL. Johnny Maziel will wash out of this league because Johnny Maziel cannot put up with it, and he can't put together the right attitude to be a professional football player, plain and simple. Doesn't matter about his talent on the field. I honestly don't care if he is the greatest quarterback since sliced bread to ever hit the football field. He's not putting it all together in order to stay on the field. Cut and dry. Do I hope it changes? Sure. But I'm not going to hold my breath for it. And in fact, I'm not even going to spend any more time on the guy past this segment right now, because he does not deserve it. He has not earned the right to hog up all this media attention. You say it's good for the league. Okay. But the Alliance is not here for publicity stunts. Now, I guess it's going to take advantage of it. Sure. But doggone it, if the guy has not even taken a snap yet and you're already crowning him the best quarterback in the league, well, I'm sorry, but we've watched some good quarterback play over the last 6 weeks. Garrett Gilbert will probably take some offense to that, right? Logan Woodside, who just put together a really solid game, might take some offense to that. We don't know how he's going to do in this league. He has yet to take a snap in the regular season, in a live game. He barely got to practice on Monday. So can we just simmer down this Johnny Maziel hype? I've lived through it before. I've seen it play out. I've seen it on the field. I've seen the attitude of this guy. If he was really serious about playing football, he would have stayed with the Alouettes, who are more than willing to give him an opportunity to start next season and play out a full 18-game season. 18 games of reps. Now he's coming in for the last 4 games of a short season, right? On a team that is probably not going to make the playoffs. No offense. I know. Go Shay. I know you're listening, and I know that you want to hold out hope to the end, but they're digging themselves a pretty big hole right now. And if you get 4 games, and listen, should he start week 1 or his week 1? No. Why should he start? Silvers has been there since camp. You give him 1 start, right? To try, or not even 1 start. You give him 1 game of action, and now you're going to yank him because he comes in relief in Mettenberg. It doesn't really do everything that he's supposed to do as a quarterback. Well, doggone it if he just barely got in the game himself, but he put in the camp time. He put in the reps during practice. Silver should start this coming week because he is the guy that is stuck with this team and he's been with this team from day one. You don't just bring a guy in off the street and put him as your starting quarterback. It just doesn't make any sense. And if it happens, it happens. But at least he needs to be holding a clipboard for the next couple of weeks. Now, if Silvers comes in next week and completely demolishes himself, okay, then you bring in Manziel for the last 3 games of the season. But you don't put him in week 1. You just don't. That is a giant slap in the face to everybody who's been working their ass off. And yes, I said ass. I'm sorry. Working their ass off in this league for the last 6 weeks. And it basically diminishes any sort of effort that they've put into this season so far. When you can say, we're bringing in a Johnny Maziel because you guys aren't good enough, to play football in this league. We need somebody else to come in off the street and save us, because you don't. This product is amazing. This product is great from start to finish, and it doesn't need a publicity stunt like Johnny Maziel. Is it going to benefit from the eyeballs? Abso-freaking-lutely. Yes, there's not a downside at all for bringing eyeballs onto the league. But here's what I want you folks who are on the fence about Johnny Maziel to consider, is that what kind of attention do you want from this? What is Johnny Maziel going to bring to this league that some of these players with better stories, with actual legit comeback stories, what more is it going to bring to the table? Answer me that. Please, somebody tweet me at Alliance FB Pod, at RJ Villagomez. I don't care which Twitter account. You give me a compelling reason why I should care that Johnny Maziel is in this league. You give me, other than the fact that there's eyeballs coming to this league, give me another compelling reason why Johnny Maziel deserves a 900 chance in the Alliance. I'm waiting. Email me at alliancefbpod@gmail.com. Give me a compelling reason, because unless you can really give me something, I'm going to just say that he's going to wash out and we won't ever have to think of him ever again, because no other NFL team is going to come calling with the type of attitude that he's got, with the type of work ethic that he's got. He says all the right things. He said all the right things to the CFL folks. But look what happened. He walked away from the contract. He walked away from a couple $100,000. For what? A better shot at the NFL? What better shot at the NFL are you going to get than putting down on film an entire 18-game season in the CFL? Bo Levi Mitchell is getting looks in the NFL right now because Bo Levi Mitchell is an amazing quarterback, no matter what type of game he's playing. So you can't tell me that it's not being done. It's being done. He just didn't want to put in the work to do it. So you tell me why this is going to be different in the AAF. I'm waiting. All right, that's it. That's all I have about Johnny Maziel. I really, honestly could go on for a whole hour just telling you that, I don't know. Anyways, all right, that's it for Johnny Maziel. Until he starts playing, he gets no more of my time. And that may cost me clicks. That may cost me listeners, but I don't care. I'm not doing this for Johnny Maziel. I'm doing this for the Alliance. And so far, he's done nothing to contribute to the conversation other than signing a contract. So until he does something on the field, we won't talk about him. All right. That's it. So, all right. That's overtime. That's the show. Thank you for listening, and we'll close it out. That'll conclude episode 19 of the Alliance Football Podcast. Thank you for listening. And again, just another exciting week in the AAF, right? We're just getting better. And sadly, it's about to end. I feel sad because we've had such great football, and we're almost done. I mean, we're kind of on the back half of the season now, and pretty soon we'll be talking about Las Vegas and the championship game. So, but anyways, until then, I'm glad that we had this week to enjoy. I'm glad that you enjoyed the recaps with me. And I'm looking forward to a great episode on Friday. I hope you guys are excited about this. We got a good episode on Friday. Got some compelling folks to talk about and talk to. So, and then, of course, we'll come back with Fantasy Ferguson, Mr. John Ferguson again, to talk some draft from Fanball. Fantasy football. So, hey, listen, if you have not already, and keep an eye out again for the AAF Allies podcast. I definitely enjoyed talking with Bern and Haas, and I'd love to be in on their show, and I hope that they enjoyed having me. But go check out the AAF Allies podcast, because I'm definitely had fun on there, and they're just good overall. So check out their past episodes and keep track of them. So. All right, until then, again, you can find me on Twitter at RJ Villagomez. Find the show on Twitter at AllianceFBPod. Email the show at AllianceFBPod@gmail.com. And of course, I have not asked you to do this before, but I might as well. Rate, subscribe, do all that stuff that you do on iTunes, on Stitcher, wherever you're at, YouTube even. Do all that stuff for me, because I do love putting out this content. And the more stars you throw on it, I guess the better iTunes rates you and more folks can listen. So, all right, until then, man, is it Saturday yet?